welcome to NAPOD, where we provide NA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us to be self-supporting by visiting napod.xyz, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 in the virtual basket. If you're also in AA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, Sobercast. Sobercast features AA speakers and workshops in the same format as NAPOD. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for Sobercast, that's 2 words, on any podcast player app, or go to Sobercast.com. Enjoy the podcast, and thanks for listening.
Tucson. But how about a big Tucson welcome for Evony?
My name's Evony. I'm an addict. I want to thank the Arizona Regional Convention Committee and my higher power for allowing me to live this long and to come here and share with you my experience with addiction and recovery. And I'm going to tell you up front, I'm going to refer to and I'm going to read from the basic text because I believe the basic text best conveys the way I suffered in addiction and what my experience has been with recovery. You know, I'm a basic text type person, and I just think it's the book of all books, you know. So, saying that, I just want to let y'all know, you know, the basic text says that a simple, honest message of recovery from addiction rings true. And that's what I hope to deliver to you tonight, you know. I never believed in recovery. Never had heard about recovery. I was born into a family of drug addicts. My mother and my father were heroin addicts. And I never knew my father. He, you know, went to prison numerous times and he died an addict, you know. My mother, she tried to make a geographical change and kind of get away from it, you know, and I have no brothers and sisters. So I'm an only child, you know, and I lived with my mother, and my mother being an addict, you know, she had numerous boyfriends and stuff. And you know, I was introduced to addiction when I was just a toddler. You know, my earliest memory as a child was going into the kitchen, and they would be in there cooking up dope and fixing. And they would shoo me out, you know. And I don't know what it was about that, but for some reason, I think from just as a toddler, I felt less than, or I felt that there were things going on in my life that were more important than I was. It's almost like from the start I had low self-esteem, you know. And, you know, the narcs would kick the door in on a regular basis in my household as a child, and my uncles and my aunts were criminals, prostitutes, and all that, you know. And so I grew up in that type of an environment, you know. And I saw them go to prison over and over again. I saw the women prostitute. And I said, what is this? What is this that causes them to continue to do this in spite of negative consequences? You know, I didn't understand that as a kid, you know. And when I was about 11 years old, somebody introduced me to a chemical substance, little person my age, you know, and I got high for the first time. And that drug was magical. It did for me what I could not do for myself. It made me feel okay. Because, see, I did not feel okay without a drug. I felt less than, felt inadequate and everything. And I returned to that drug from the age of 11 over and over and over again. I tried to use every day. And I may not even have been an addict yet. You know, I was a kid. But I loved it so much that I proceeded to start getting high every day. And my mother caught me. And she tried to reason with me, you know, and I felt like she was kind of being a hypocrite because I knew she shot dope and sure she was trying to use sociably or whatever, you know, but, you know, for me as an addict, anytime I have some negative consequences behind using, I don't stop using. I just modify my using so that maybe I don't get busted or I don't have any repercussions or whatever. That's the nature of my addiction, you know, because I've suffered many, many negative consequences over my lifetime from the use of drugs, but I wouldn't stop, So I did that with my mother. I didn't stop using. And the funny thing about it, for me, this is my story. For me, addiction always causes my behavior to deteriorate. It just does. I do bad things to get high. And from the very start, at 11 years old, I started stealing from my mother's purse. I started stealing her cigarettes and smoking cigarettes when I'd get high. I started breaking in lockers at school and all that. I started getting in trouble in school. Automatically my behavior just went bad, downhill, And when I was 12, they came and got me out of class and called me to the principal's office. And I thought, well, what have I got in trouble for now? And I go to the principal's office and I walk in the principal's office and there sits the principal and there sits a guy who I automatically identified as a detective. See, I was still a teenager, just a kid, but I knew what a nautical looked like. I knew what a cop looked like because I had had that experience as a toddler. And then there sat a priest. And I thought, oh shit. They've even brought God into this. What? What have I done now? And they sat me down and they began to ask me about my home life and they began to ask me about my mother's boyfriends. And then they proceeded to tell me that one of my mother's boyfriends, she had numerous, had shot and killed her and committed suicide. And I said I was an only child and I never knew my father. And my world just collapsed. And the priests and them, they tried to comfort me and they told me that they had called, I have a square uncle. They had called my square uncle and asked him to come get me. And, they were going to take me to a foster home until he got there to pick me up, And on the way to the foster home, the priest tells me, your mama's in heaven now, son. God has took her home with him. And then when my uncle come and got me the next day, he said, Mama's in heaven and God has chosen to take her home with him to heaven. But in the mind of this 12-year-old, in the heart of this 12-year-old, I said, God, you've done me an injustice. I may have done little old wrongs, I did a little stealing, or I was doing high, or whatever. But I felt like God had punished me beyond my deeds. And I became angry at God. And I became angry at life. And they took me to live with my grandmother. And my grandmother was an alcoholic. And then, like I said, my mother's brothers and sisters were all addicts. And they were steadily doing the things that they do, And they put me in a new school. And of course, as soon as I got into school, a new school, I started making friends. And I made friends that used drugs. And I proceeded to get high every day. And back in those days, there were such things as LSD and mescaline and marijuana and all those things that happened back in the late 60s and early 70s, that people did. And I proceeded to use daily, and I didn't care what combination of drugs I used, because for me, I really didn't see a reason to live. I had nobody in my life. I had no one. The only person that I thought really cared about me, which was my mother, had been taken from me, And the basic text says on page 5, it says, we developed a point of view that enabled us to pursue our addiction without regard for our own well-being or the well-being of others. That simply means that I didn't give a damn about myself or anybody else. And I started hanging out with a bunch of druggies and, users and little criminals and all that other stuff, and just tried to kill myself, And, of course, I'm here. I wasn't successful, But, my behavior began to deteriorate. And then when I would go home to my grandmother, I'd get home and she, like I said, she was an alcoholic. She'd be in the cantina every day, so I had to kind of fend for myself, cook my own supper. And then my uncles would show up or my aunts would show up on their runs, and they'd see me getting high And they tell me, hey, man, that stuff you're doing, that LSD and all that stuff, it's going to burn your brain cells, man. You're not going to come back off of one of them trips, you know. So I felt ridiculed by my family. And those people were my idols. You know, those are the people that I looked up to. My male role models were kind of like me. They were all tattooed up. They'd been to prison numerous times, you know. And when I began to receive ridicule from them, well, I'm so hungry for attention. I'm so hungry for acceptance. What did I do? I chose to become like them. I chose to use what they used so that I would fit in and no longer be ridiculed or criticized. And that's what I did. You know, and I didn't know then. I know today, and I knew from my first step, fourth step, my uncles and them put me out there on Front Street, man. When people would pull up in front of the house wanting to score, they'd hand me the dope and tell them, run out there and give it to them. Get the money. This is what they're going to give you. But what happened was I began to develop connections through doing this deal. Old addicts would see me as the nephew of so-and-so, and you're from that familia or whatever, you know, and I began to get connected with this drug life, more so, old people, you know. And that's what I did, man, you know. And the basic text says on page 6, and it's a little kind of a long passage, but I'm going to read it anyway because it best describes to me my experience. It says, certain things followed as we continue to use. See, things always follow as I continue to use. You know, it says, we became accustomed to a state of mind that is common to addicts. We forgot what it was like before we started using. We forgot about social graces. Everything that I had learned as a kid, maybe as far as coping skills or how to play, I forgot how to play. You know, because that's what it says there too. It says we acquired strange habits and mannerisms. You know? It says we forgot how to work, we forgot how to play, we forgot how to express ourselves, and how to show concern for others. We forgot how to feel. And that's really what I liked about dope, is I did not have to feel, you know. And I began to do the things necessary to support my habit, you know. And I'll tell you this much up front, I'm a lazy addict. I didn't know I was a lazy addict, you know. But I went from dealing on a small time basis, of course I became my own customer always, you know, to stealing, you know. And people, my peers, the older people showed me how to break into houses and, you know, burglarize and all that, you know. And, you know, it still amazes me today how a little bitty guy like me could snatch up a big old TV and be running down the street with it. And today I try to move my furniture around in my house and it likes to kill me, you know. But, you know, dope is almost like adrenaline. It gives you superpower, you know. But, you know, I went from dealing to stealing and burglarizing, you know, but to me the bad thing was when I'd steal something, I had to go pawn it. Then I'd get the money. Then I had to call the connection. Then I had to wait on him or I had to go meet him somewhere, you know. So I thought, well, you know, one of them burglars, I got a pistol. And I said, well, now I'll just go get the money. And then all I got to do is call the connection, you know. And then after a while of hanging out with them older men and stuff, older drug addicts, I thought, I'll just go rob the connection. You know? You know, he's got what I want anyway, you know? You know, so that's what I proceeded to do, you know? And 1978, March 5th of 1978, I can remember that day, I got arrested in a drug house. I had the lady, the man, and the children duct taped up. I done beat the man, pistol whipped him, tried to make him tell me where the dope was at, and he said they hadn't picked up yet. They just had a big old wad of money. They were waiting for the connection to bring them some ounces or whatever. But what happened when I was in there is somebody came to the door and knocked. And I'd already been shot in this hand from another robbery. And if I'd have had any snap, because I was using Dilaudis and heroin and Valiums, and I was pretty loaded, you know. If I'd have had any snap, I'd have answered the door and snatched in whoever was at the door and just robbed them too, because they probably had $20, $30 on them, you know. But I didn't, because I was so loaded. I ignored the door. I figured they'll just go away. But it was the nephew of the people I was robbing. And he went around and peeked in the window and called the police. And when next thing I know, the house was surrounded. And I didn't have anything. What can I do? Shoot it? I'm not stupid enough to shoot it out with them, you know. And they give me a 15-year sentence in the Texas Department of Corrections for aggravated robbery. And I ended up doing 7.5 years on that 15-year sentence my first time in prison, you know. But the thing is when I went to prison, I already knew people there. Because everybody from the streets, everybody from the barrio, mostly everybody from the barrio was already there. So I come to prison and I'm already kind of connected, you know. And, you know, just because I go to prison and I'm off the streets don't mean I stop getting high. I got high in prison, you know. And I did stupid stuff in prison, you know. I ended up stabbing a guy in prison, you know, because being a little guy, and I'd been a little guy all my life, you know, but the way to survive on the streets as a little guy is to be vicious. And, you know, for an individual who was angry at God because God took his mother, for an individual who was angry at life because life had taken his mother or done him an injustice, it was real easy for me to be vicious, you know. And I ended up stabbing this guy in prison, and I got in a whole lot of trouble in prison and all that stuff. And it was really strange that I kept thinking, why don't they ever let me make parole, you know? Well, because I keep messing up, you know. But while I was in prison, I went to college, and I started doing little old things that, you know, because I never got my GED or anything. I started trying to do some things, utilize that time a little wisely. And while I was there, I realized something. I said, what brought me to prison? It was shooting dope. Stealing. Well, maybe if I'd quit shooting dope, I wouldn't have to steal. You know? Okay, so maybe I need to get out and revert back to what I did as a kid. Just smoke a little weed, drink a little alcohol, find me a good woman, and everything will be all right, you know? And when I was released from prison, I thought that I could do that. You know, I had never worked in my life until prison. You know, in a Texas prison, you pick cotton. It's slave labor. So what is it? There's a guy on a horse that rides behind you, and you work like a slave, you know. And I had never picked cotton in my life. The only thing I knew about cotton was you threw it in the cooker to draw your dope up through, you know. That was all I knew about it, you know. But I figured since they had worked me in prison for 7.5 years, maybe I ought to get out and get a job. You know, it couldn't be any worse than the way they treated me. And I got out and I, you know, proceeded to get a little old job, and I proceeded to try to smoke a little weed, drink a little beer, and try to find me a good woman. And I found an old connection. She had got busted with 49 ounces of heroin. And she said she was going to square up, and I said I was going to square up, and we got together, and I fathered a child. But there was a new kid on the block in the Mexican neighborhood when I got out. It was white powder, and I had never messed with it. Now white powder was fairly inexpensive, you know. And I got involved with that deal because people know you, and they say, "Well, here, brother, here, get on your feet. This is going to help you get you financially up there. Here's an ounce, you know." And, of course, you know what happens. I became my own customer, you know, my best customer. And what ended up happening is me and the mother of my daughter, well, her mama had been to prison twice. Her stepdaddy had been to prison twice. So, and the mother of my daughter was on life parole. So, you know, all my in-laws were outlaws, you know. And we got in a knockdown drag out one night, and I put both of them on a life flight. You know, I didn't mean to try to kill her, but that was just my response to that type of a deal, you know. And they sent me back to prison. But what was different is this time, they sent me back on a violation, and then I came back and I went to trial, and they sent me back to prison again. What was different this time when I went to prison was they had drug counselors in prison, you know. And I knew that they were going to want me to participate in some type of drug counseling. So I thought I'll beat them to the punch, and I'll sign up for this stuff, and that way maybe they'll make me make parole, you know. And so I signed up for that deal, and I started going to these classes with this drug counselor, and they were reading from the other fellowship's book, you know. And I would listen to them read and all that, and I participated in it a little bit, and I told them, that's not me, man. That old stuff that's in that book, it sounds pretty good for them people to drink, but that's not me. You know, this thing can't help me. And he's the one that told me, Ebony, there's a fellowship especially for you. And I said, a fellowship, you know what? Because to me a fellowship was one of them church groups, them Jesus people or whatever, you know. He said, a fellowship, he said, there's another 12-step program especially for you. And I said, what's it called? And he says, Narcotics Anonymous. And I said, well, when did they meet? When, you know, and at that time there wasn't an H&I subcommittee that came on that unit that I was on, you know. But I got out of prison, and because I have no family, they always have to send me to a halfway house. And when they let me out the gate in prison, I met up with an old addict. You know, he was probably 50 years old, and the first thing I asked him was, do you know where to score? And me and him went and scored, and I set my addiction off all over again. And I went to this halfway house that night, and of course you know what happened. A couple of days later, I'm in another town that I don't know, in the black neighborhood, looking for what I like best, you know. And I got kicked out of the halfway house, and they told me, you need to find your own place to live. And I told the parole board, I said, if you leave me to my own devices, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. He said, I don't care. He said, we put you in a halfway house. You need to find a place to go. So I found a place in Tyler, Texas, and went there. And when I went in to report, they told me, you need to go to these meetings. And they give me a list of AA meetings. And I said, well, I'm not an alcoholic. And they said, well, that's all we got here. You need to go to these meetings or we're going to send you back to prison. And so I went to an AA meeting. And before I went, I had to get a buzz, you know, because I was scared. I was scared to go to, I didn't know what was in meetings. You know, I didn't know what kind of people would be there or whatever. I went to this meeting. I got me a buzz on, drank a little beer and stuff, you know, and I went to this meeting. And after the meeting, this guy comes up to me and he says, hi. He says, my name's James. He said, how long you been sober? And I said, I haven't. He says, I know I can smell you. That's what he said. He said, I know I can smell you. He said, keep coming back. And I thought, what kind of people are these, man? You know? He knows I'm loaded, and he tells me, keep coming back, you know? And my third meeting that I went to, another old guy comes up to me after the meeting. Of course, he looks at me, and he can see I'm not an alcoholic. I don't look like an alcoholic, man. I look like a criminal. And he tells me, he says, there's a meeting across town that you might be interested in. And I said, really? I said, what is it? He says, it's a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And I said, where do they meet at? And he gave me the address to the Narcotics Anonymous meeting in Tyler, Texas. They had been there about 8 years then. I think they just celebrated 23 years as a group. And I went to the meeting, and I looked at the people, and I said, these look similar to people that I know, you know? Because, you know, the guys had tattoos and the women were kind of sleazy looking, and I like sometimes, you know, you know, these are my kind of people, you know? But, and, you know, I went to a few meetings and I thought, you know, I seen a white key tag and they're giving out these white key tags, and I thought, well, maybe I can get me one of them things. And, you know, and I got me a white key tag, and I thought, well, you know, I heard them say just for today, and don't use just for today. You don't ever have to use again just for today. And so I tried to get me some clean time, you know, and I got a couple of days and 3 days and 4 days, and I got 30 days, man. You know, and I see people getting orange key tags and green key tags and all that. And I thought, maybe, boy, but that's a hell of a long time, you know. When I got 30 days, man, I was so proud. And they had an activity, a little dance and all that, you know, and I go to this activity and stuff, man, and I'm at this activity, and this little old chick comes up to me, and she says, hi, she says, my name's Denise. She said, what's your name? And I said, I'm Ebony. She says, you got 30 days, don't you? And I said, yeah, I do. She says, you like Chiva. And that's a slang for my drug of choice, and and she showed interest in, really what she did was she 13-stepped me, but I didn't put up a fight because, I hadn't been out of prison that long, I was looking to get laid and she was available, and so this is where we went, and of course when she was around about 15 years, she never got over a year clean, and eventually she died from cancer. But when she mentioned us getting high, I got high. She was my higher power. And I got high, and I never got any more clean time after that, And the thing about it is, in Tyler, there wasn't what I like. She would give me some Xanaxes, and we'd smoke some weed, and we'd drink, or whatever. But every once in a while, I'd run off to Dallas to go get some caps, or I'd run down to Houston and go get what I like best, and then I'd run back up to Tyler, and I'd go to meetings, and I'd get my sheet signed and all that stuff, and I'd lie about, I wouldn't get any more key tags, but I just wouldn't ever get anything, man, because I had to be there, But as I came to meetings and I listened to you people talk about being clean and celebrating various lengths of clean time and having lives, there was a spark in my heart. There was a desperate desire to have something different than what I'd been having all my life, One weekend I run down to Houston and scored. And Sunday morning I woke up sleeping in the back of my Chevy Citation, man, outside the Connection's house. And I looked over at the Connection and I thought, man, the Connection won't even let me in no more, man, they knew I'd robbed a bunch of them before, back in the days, but it's like, and I'm fixing to get hooked again. And I know what happens when I get hooked. I start stealing and I'm going to give me another prison sentence. They're going to give me a life sentence. And I had been around long enough to hear y'all's message. And I made a decision that I was going to turn myself in at the sheriff's department. Because I had a warrant out for me already. I had a misdemeanor charge pending from Tyler. So I drove all the way from Houston back to Tyler. And I had a guy that I called a sponsor. But I never really used him. He was a 7-time loser. And I called him and told him, I've got a warrant. And I want to turn myself in at the county jail. Because the basic text says, when at the end of the road, that we find that we can no longer function as a human being, either with or without drugs. See, I couldn't function without drugs, and I couldn't function with drugs. It says that we face a dilemma. It says go on to the bitter end, jails, institutions, or death, or find a new way to live. And I had nothing to lose. I was lost. And I drove all the way back, and my sponsor told me, take your basic text with you. He said, you ain't going nowhere you ain't ever been before. I thought he's supposed to go with me and hold my hand, man, Because, I ain't never turned myself in. I've always jumped bonds. I'm always, catch me when you can type deal. But I went to the county jail and told them who I was, and they snatched me up and threw me in jail. And I began to pray, man, God, you know my heart. You know what I need. And if I got to go back to prison, so be it. But man, I can't go on like this, And I hate to say it, maybe I was suicidal, man. I was in despair. I was given the gift of desperation, And what ended up happening was the parole board came down and said, continue supervision, impose sanctions. That was my first miracle, man, because I had another case pending, man. I had never seen them reinstate somebody that had charges pending already, And I got out and I went to meetings every day, 2 meetings a day, 3 meetings a day. Back where I cleaned up, they had candlelight meetings and stuff, The place I cleaned up was such a dive. The building was ratty, backed up to a little bayou, and sometimes the addicts would break in and steal the 7 Tradition money, and it was a rough. I've shot dope in better places than my original home group, man. I'm serious, but they had what I needed, The basic text says that the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous is what's it say? It's a fellowship of survival. That's what it says. It's a fellowship of survival because it puts us in direct and intimate contact with those who can help us most. It's a fellowship of survival. And the only way I was going to survive and maybe recover was to stay in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. And I worked on my steps, and I got with my sponsor and I went over my first few steps, my fourth step and all that. And in my fourth step, I identified that the reason I had never been able to have a relationship with the power greater than myself was because I resented God because of what I thought that He had taken my mother. But I came to realize that what happened to my mother was just circumstances, human nature circumstances. But I had been holding God to blame all those years, And I began to develop a relationship with the power greater than myself. And really, to tell you the truth, for the first few years in my recovery, the group was a power greater than me. Because I didn't trust God a whole hell of a lot. I was trying. But I really didn't trust Him a whole hell of a lot. And my sponsor was a power greater than myself. He was doing what I had previously been incapable of doing, was to staying clean. And when I needed to make a decision, I'd call my sponsor. And when I needed to make a decision, I'd go to meetings and I'd throw out what was going on in my life, And that's when I did, And I went to meetings every day. One of those meetings afterwards, they had group conscious. And they said, why don't you stay around for group conscious? And I said, what's group conscious? They said, well, it's the group's business meeting. I said, oh, okay, what do y'all do at it? They said, well, just stay around. I said, okay. So I stayed around, and what ended up happening is they got me to do some service work, And they give me a key. And they asked me to start opening the doors, And I thought they had to be crazy, man, But it was an honor. Same way being here tonight is an honor bestowed upon me by this convention committee. They bestowed upon me the honor of opening those doors. And back when I cleaned up, you had to attend a chairperson's workshop. You couldn't just show up and open the doors. They give you some direction about how the meeting was supposed to be and what's supposed to transpire in the meeting. It wasn't a blind thing, There was some order and some structure. There was a grave responsibility that went with chairing a meeting, man. And they taught me and they nurtured me, into doing this, man. And my sponsor would come with me and all that. You show up early and you make the coffee pot and you set up, the chairs and all that. And after the meeting, you clean all that up and you empty the ashtrays and you wipe the tables down and all that. Nowadays people chair meetings, they just want to run off, and lock the doors and stuff. But that's what they did, And then, of course, they got me to keep coming back, and then another group conscious. They asked me to be the GSR alternate. What's a GSR alternate, It's the group service representatives alternate, And what do? Well, you go to area and you take our donation and you bring back information from area and all that stuff. It's like, okay, I can do that, and they sent me on to area, And I get to area, and not doing that deal, and they have an H&I subcommittee meeting in the area, and it's like, what's H&I, and they say, well, it's hospitals and institutions. It's like, y'all got all these damn initials, GSR, H&I, PI, and the only thing I knew about initials was FBI and DEA, it's like, man, that's, that was it, man, but guess what? Now I'm the H&I vice chair, and the next thing I'm on an H&I panel going to the prisons, And then I'm going on an H&I panel going to the treatment centers, I did H&I for about 7 years of my recovery, And it was one of the greatest things that I was involved with because it allowed me to walk into prison in the morning and walk out later that afternoon, And anytime I can do that, I'm happy. I'm happy because it has never been my experience before, But, one of them H&I meetings, we went to a prison meeting and, on the gurney unit, and, they had asked me to come share. And, I went, did that meeting, and, went on home, really didn't think anything about it, just another H&I meeting that I've done over the years, and stuff. And, about this 2007. About 8 years ago, I went to the Lone Star Regional Convention up in Dallas and was there hanging out in the lobby like we do, you know. And a little white guy come up to me, man, and he says, "You're Evony." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're the reason I'm here." And I said, and I kind of stepped back and I thought, well, maybe I screwed his girlfriend, maybe I sold her, you know, like, what do you mean I'm the reason you're here, guy, you know? And he says, I was on the gurney unit. He said, and it was hot down there on the prison wing. He said, and I knew they had air conditioning up there where they have their meetings. He says, and I went up there to cool off and chill. He says, and you told your story. He said, and I believe that if you could stay clean from where you came from, that maybe it will work for me too. He's still clean today, man. You know? And, but that's the reason we do the things we do, man. You know? I've had about 4 sponsors in my recovery, man. And a couple I've lost to relapse. Every one of them has taught me something. Every one of them has been in my life for a season and for a reason. You know, they passed on to me at that point in their lives their experience, strength, and hope. I have been able to reach out to them and receive consolation and guidance and support and everything, you know. And I believe, and I've said this before, the 3 S's of recovery, which is sponsorship, steps, and service work. I believe that they're very important that we do those things, you know. And, you know, I've been clean a couple of years, and I really got to thinking about my life and how I had nobody in my life and, you know, had, you know, no woman in my life really. I had, you know, different girlfriends in recovery and stuff, and I have no mama, daddy, brothers and sisters or nothing. And I thought, I sure would like to know my daughter, you know. But see, I couldn't contact her mama because I went to prison for attempted murder. You know, and I thought, I can't call her because all she's got to do is call the police and say, he made a threat. He almost killed me so many years ago, and he called me on the phone, and he made a threat, and they would arrest me for terroristic threats. You know. But anyway, little by little, I began to pray that God would allow me the opportunity to get to know my daughter. And through the grapevine, in Houston, I heard that she had went back to prison. And I got her information, and I sent her a letter, and I really didn't never hear back from her. And then one year she wrote me, because I had told her in my letter that I was in recovery. And she said, are you still going to those meetings? And I said, yes. And she said, would you send me one of those books? And I called the service office and got her a basic text, and it works how and why, and sent them to her. And we began to establish a friendship, you know. And I went to prison and visited her and made my amends for almost killing her, you know, as best I could. And she forgave me. And she told me, when I get out, I want you to come and meet your daughter. She says, I don't want you just to jump up in the middle of her life out of nowhere. She says, I want to be able to kind of break it to her and allow you to meet your daughter and become a part of your daughter's life, you know. And that happened for me, you know. But it took several years of praying before that came to pass, you know. And sometimes the things we pray for in recovery, they don't happen overnight. We have to be consistent. We have to continue to pray about them. We have to continue to do the next right thing, which is come to meetings, don't use, be of service, work the steps, you know, get a little better. And, you know, I was going to those H&I meetings. I was working in a motel. I I don't have very many skills, but I kind of have a knack for working my hands. I was a maintenance man. And I came home, and in one of those H&I meetings, I met a guy. He was from the other fellowship. See, in Texas, they have big anniversaries, recovery anniversaries in the prison system. Every year they have an anniversary. And they'll invite 2 or 3 fellowships. And in one of those anniversaries that I went and shared at, I met this older gentleman who was in the other fellowship. And he works for the parole board. And I came home one day from my little motel job, and I had a message on my answering machine, and he said, this is Roy. Call me. And I thought, man, what's that dude want with me, man? He works for the parole board, you know. And So anyway, the next morning I went to work, and I knew the numbers of the parole office because I had to call regularly and all that stuff. So I called up there and I said, Mr. Williford. And he said, yeah. I said, this is Evony. I said, you asked me to call you. And he said, how you doing, buddy? I said, I'm doing all right. And he said, you want a job? And I said, a job? You know, I said, I got a job, man. he said, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice has initiated something they call the Criminal Justice Initiative, where they're starting these treatment programs for the prisoners. And they've opened up all these halfway houses across the state of Texas. He says, and there's one opening up in Texarkana, and they need a good hand. And I think that you would make a good hand working at this place. And I mean, I was just floored, man. It's like, this is a productive member of society. This is a guy that works for the parole board. That he would see something of value in me, man, to make this recommendation. I said, well, I'm on parole. I can't just up move to Texarkana. He says, I already spoke to your parole officer. We're going to transfer you, you know. So I loaded up my little old Chihuahua and my TV set and all that, man, and I moved off to Texarkana and took this job, you know. And, you know, to me, that's a miracle, man, because, you know, in my low self-esteem, never believed that I had anything to offer anybody. Never thought that I could be a productive member of society in areas other than Narcotics Anonymous, you know. And I took this job and I worked up there until the place shut down up there, and then I moved back to Tyler, you know. But, you know, it's like the basic text says, when the drugs go and the addict works the program, it says wonderful things happen. It says lost dreams awaken and new possibilities arise. We don't know what happened. We don't know what doorways our higher power can open up for us, you know. We just don't, you know. And I did that deal, you know, and I'm just an old criminal, man, you know. But I started going to college and I got my degree. I became a licensed counselor, you know. And I'll tell you what, the state of Texas, before they licensed me, they looked at my criminal history. And they said, this guy has done some pretty bad stuff in his days, you know. But he's got these letters of reference from, you know, people supporting him. And he's gone through all this effort to what they consider rehabilitate himself, you know. And they granted me my license, man. And in Texas, when they granted me my license, that means the door is open anywhere in the state of Texas. Why? Because I speak Spanish. See, I speak Spanish, you know, and it was at that time that the mother of my daughter got out of prison and told me, you want to come meet your daughter? And I took a job in Houston. That was the only reason I moved back to Houston, was to go down there and be a part of my daughter's life. If it weren't for that, I'd have stayed up in East Texas, you know. But this is the opportunity that I have prayed for. This is what I have sought in my life, to be a part of my daughter's life. You know, and I've taken my daughter to Narcotics Anonymous meetings. You know, I've taken her to dances. I talked to her about addiction. You know, she's 20 years old now. She made me a grandfather last year, you know. But she's not, her picker's broke. She picks some terrible guys, you know. She's really gorgeous, man. She's got a nice tan. She gets golden because she's got the Mexican blood in her. She's got beautiful blue eyes and from her mama, you know. And she just, she gets these guys, boy, and she just works them, man, you know. She just, you know, but she made me a grandpa, you know, and I'm proud of her. She don't smoke cigarettes. She's never taken any drugs. She was in the army. She went to the army and was in Germany. And it's like, you know, I'm just so blessed to be able to do this. You know, never in my wildest dreams would I believe that I could be a part of somebody's life and have a positive impact, you know. You know, I was talking with Dana and I was telling her, you know, I was 45 years old, never been married, you know, and I had met a lady in Narcotics Anonymous and we got married. And it lasted about a year and a half. You know, and I don't know if it's because I've got some old Catholic dregs, beliefs or whatever, you know. But when that marriage fell apart, man, and she asked me for a divorce, you know, I mean, it just completely broke my heart, man, you know. I mean, to me, it was another grave loss. And I really hurt. I felt like a failure, you know. And the basic text in Who is an Addict, it says that failure had become a way of life and self-esteem was non-existent. You know, I've had so many failures in my life that sometimes those old thoughts creep back in, you know. But, you know, I became real desperate and I became real emotionally hurt and wounded, you know. Because I thought, well, here, I waited all this time and I picked this woman out and it don't work out, and now what am I going to be? You know, an old man by myself again, you know. But I went to meetings, I talked with my sponsor, I slung snot and cried and all the things that I needed to do. No, I'm serious, you know, because it was difficult, you know. And what I know, you know, the basic text says that the program of Narcotics Anonymous offers us a chance to ease the pain of living through spiritual principles. And that's what I did. You know, I worked the steps on that relationship. I learned to let go. I didn't try to kill her, you know. And it was, and what was funny is, I had to start the interferon for hepatitis C, and she had me on her insurance, you know. And I asked her, would you continue to carry me on your insurance until I finish this treatment? Your insurance is better than the insurance that my job offers me, you know. And she said, sure, Evony, you know, and she did that. My ex-wife turned gay, you know, and that really kind of blew me away, you know. But, you know, we had such a, you know, when I let go, there was no reason to be angry. There was no reason to hold on to any ill feelings and allow her to be who she was seeking to be or thought she was supposed to be or whatever, you know. And I did that, you know. And what was funny, when I celebrated my 12th anniversary, her and her girlfriend or whatever came to my 12th anniversary and shared for me, man, you know. And I thought, wow, this is a weird setup here, you know. It's like, you know, but you know, I was real honored. And I think the only reason I could do that, you know, when I cleaned up in Tyler, there was only one group. There was no other Narcotics Anonymous meeting there but one. And in that group, people would get separated, get divorced. They had nowhere else to go. They would come back to meetings. Sometimes they'd have knockdown dragouts or whatever. But because of their necessity for the Narcotics Anonymous program, they would eventually begin to practice some principles and get over it, you know. And so I had that example from my early years in recovery to try to practice when my crisis hit, you know. And to me, that's what Narcotics Anonymous is about. It's about us sharing, you know, our difficulties with another individual. And when we come to that difficulty and not have used and we've grown, now I have some experience to share with the next guy that comes to me, man, you know. And, you know, the program offers me all these things besides freedom from active addiction, you know. I never believed that I could recover, you know. When I first heard that passage in the 5th tradition that says that our message is hope, that an addict, any addict, can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. Initially, I just thought I was different. Maybe this may not work. But after a while of being involved and working the steps and being of service, you know, there's something that cements in your heart that says, yes, this is true. You know, all that I saw as a child, a toddler, because see, as a toddler, I didn't believe that there was any recovery. All them people died from hepatitis and overdoses and all that stuff. You know, that tired old lie that once an addict, always an addict was cemented in my brain as a kid. But y'all have changed all that. Y'all have showed me that recovery is possible. Y'all have showed me that I can be an okay individual if I'll just continue to do the things that y'all have showed me to do, you know. Y'all have given me hope. And when I got here, I did not have hope. You know, I had to ask a friend of mine, what's hope? And he told me, Evony, hope is a vision beyond your present circumstances. See, I didn't possess that. But y'all gave me that. That no matter what circumstance I find myself in, there's a vision. There's something beyond that. I only have to do that on a daily basis. The same way I stay clean, you know. Today I work for a psychiatrist. I work for a team of psychiatrists. And I don't normally say that, man, you know. And we work with people that are schizophrenics and bipolars, depression, and all that stuff. And that are drug addicts. You know, people that sometimes have a double whammy, you know. And never, you know, and anytime I go interview for a position and they ask me, have I ever been convicted of a crime, I always have to tell them, I have an extensive criminal history. I want you to know this before you start running the check on me. If you have any problems with hiring me, I'm telling you up front, let's not even go to this trouble, you know. But they hired me, you know, and I've been with this agency almost 5 years. And it has really changed me because some of these people need a little more love, you know, need a little more care and concern. They need a little more empathy. You know, and I'm from the old school type drug counselor. You don't need them pills that they're giving you. Them psychiatrists is going to mess you up, you know. But what has happened is I've had to go back to college, take some additional training, learn some things about all these things, and then I've had to work up underneath the psychiatrists and see why they do what they do, you know, so that I could be what I'm supposed to be, you know. And to me, that is a miracle that an old street addict like me, an old criminal like me, can come from that environment and that family to become somebody worthwhile, somebody that the professional field looks to, you know, in regards to helping these individuals. You know, to me, it's a miracle. And I was telling Debbie and Dana today, you know, I'm a real simple guy, man. You know, people ask me to come speak, and I'm always concerned, what am I supposed to wear, man? I don't like to dress up. I dress up Monday through Friday, you know. When it comes to the weekend or the evenings, I'm blue jeans and try to put on a nice looking shirt. I'm a very, very simple individual. And that's the way my recovery is. That's the way my life is. Because I never had nothing growing up. I don't need a whole lot to be happy. I just don't, man. Because my happiness does not come from what I possess. My happiness does not come from who I'm involved with. My happiness comes from the individual that I am and the spirituality, the spiritual life that I have been given as a result of working the steps of Narcotics Anonymous. Today, I feel pretty good about Evony, you know. There's a passage in the basic text, I think it's on page 95 or 96 or something. Let me see if I can find it. It says we develop self-esteem. See, we went from, in Who is an Addict, it says failure had become a way of life, and self-esteem was non-existent, right? I was just so beat up that I was worthless to myself. We go from that state to this here. It says we develop self-esteem as we help others find a new way of life. That's how I have become an okay individual with Ebony. See, I may have had problems with women. I may have had problems with geographical places I've lived or whatever. You know, other individuals in meetings, you know, and stuff like that, service conferences. But the main individual that I've always had a problem with is Ebony. You know, I came here to change one individual, right? It's me. You know, me. And through the steps, and through having a sponsor, and through being of service, that has happened. You know, today I know that tired old lie, once an addict, always an addict, is dead. Today I know we do recover, you know, and it is a journey from within. It happens on the inside, you know. I still look the same on the outside. but what has transpired within me has been produced through this fellowship and you very, very loving people, man, you know. And I want to thank you. I don't know how long I've been up here. I always lose track of time. I want to thank the Arizona region for allowing me to come share with you, you know, what has happened in my life through the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous and the great gift that has been bestowed upon me by this fellowship. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please help us improve our ranking so others can find us by putting a review on Stitcher, iTunes, or your favorite podcast index. Nawpod is ad-free thanks to the folks supporting the show with $1 more per month. If you enjoy listening, you can join them by going to nawpod.xyz and looking for the donate link. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.